Sunday morning in a town where everyone knows everyone. They tore my notebook apart right there in the sanctuary, the only evidence I had to protect my daughter and secure my promotion. My aunt sneered, "Prayers can't save you." They thought the church was their shield. They didn't know I was about to turn the very spotlight from the pulpit into a beacon that would expose the truth. In 3 hours, their carefully constructed world of false piety would crumble, and the congregation they'd manipulated for years would finally see who they really were. My name is Eva Hartley, and I should have known better than to bring my leather notebook to Grace Hollow Church that morning. But after 9 years of being a single mother, you learn to carry everything important with you, especially when your ex-husband's lawyer keeps demanding documentation and your daughter's therapist needs weekly updates. The hymn, "How Great Thou Art," was just ending when it happened. Maddie stood beside me in the pew, her voice pure and sweet among the congregation of 200 souls who'd gathered for Sunday service in our Pennsylvania town. The morning light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow fragments across the worn wooden floors of the 100-year-old sanctuary. Sunday school had just dismissed, and I was tucking my notebook back into my purse, the one with the broken zipper I kept meaning to fix. Inside those pages were Maddie's therapy notes about her anxiety attacks, the scholarship application draft for the Briarfield Youth Arts Program, and most importantly, the restraining order petition against Derek, her father, who'd shown up drunk at her school last month. "Eva, honey, what's this?" My mother's voice cut through the post-hymn chatter. Elaine Hartley had somehow materialized beside me, her perfectly manicured fingers already inside my bag. "Mom, that's private." But she'd already pulled out the notebook, and something in her face changed. That practiced smile she wore like armor shifted into something harder. "Paul," she called to my father, who was shaking hands with Reverend Collier near the altar. "Paul, come here." The small crowd of congregants in the hallway seemed to sense drama brewing. They didn't scatter people in Briarfield, never missed a chance for gossip, but they pretended to be absorbed in their coffee and donuts from the fellowship table. My father approached with his measured deacon's walk, his face already set in that expression of disappointed concern he'd perfected over 30 years of marriage. "What is it?" "Elaine, our daughter is planning to deny Derek his parental rights. And look," she flipped through pages with violation written in every gesture. "She's been taking Maddie to a therapist, filling her head with nonsense about trauma and anxiety disorders. Mom, give that back." I reached for the notebook, but she pulled it away, and that's when my Aunt Virginia appeared like a vulture sensing carrion. "Family troubles." Jenny's voice dripped with false sympathy. As head of the church's fundraising committee, she had a talent for appearing wherever there was conflict, collecting information like tithes. "It's nothing, Jenny," I said, trying once more to retrieve my notebook, but my mother had already opened to the section about the scholarship application. "Arts program. You're encouraging this child to waste time on painting instead of focusing on her studies. She's 9 years old, Mom. She loves art." The ripping sound cut through the air like a gunshot. My mother had torn the notebook clean down the spine, pages fluttering to the floor like dying birds. Maddie's therapy notes, the carefully documented incidents with Derek, my handwritten draft of the restraining order, all of it scattered across the hallway floor. "Mom." Maddie's cry was pure anguish. She dropped to her knees, trying to gather the pages, but Aunt Jenny stepped on one, her heel grinding it into the carpet. "Prayers can't save you," Jenny said, her smile sharp as glass. "Not when you're poisoning this child against her father and filling her head with secular psychology nonsense." Reverend Collier stood 10 feet away, watching. Our eyes met, and I saw him make a calculated decision to turn back to his conversation, pretending not to notice. The dozen or so congregants in the hallway suddenly found the ceiling, the walls, their phones anything but us fascinating. "This is what's wrong with your generation," my father said, his voice carrying that particular brand of religious authority that brooks no argument, no respect for family unity. No understanding of forgiveness and submission to God's plan. God's plan. I kept my voice level, though my hands shook. God's plan includes Derek showing up drunk at Maddie's school. God's plan includes enough. Elaine's voice cracked like a whip. You're hysterical. Everyone can see it. Maybe we should discuss your fitness as a mother with the family court. The threat hung in the air, around us. I heard the whispers starting. Poor Elaine, dealing with such a difficult daughter. That child needs stability. Sometimes the courts make mistakes in custody. I knelt beside Maddie, pulling her against me as she sobbed. Her small body shook with the force of it. This was supposed to be her safe place, her church family, the community that claimed to love her. It's okay, baby, I whispered, though nothing about this was okay. We'll fix this. But as I looked at the destroyed pages, months of documentation, evidence, truth scattered and torn on the church floor, I knew something had to change. They thought they'd won. They thought public humiliation in God's house would break me, make me comply, force me back into the suffocating box of the good Christian daughter. They were wrong. That night, after I'd tucked Maddie into bed and dried her tears with promises that everything would be okay, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the salvaged pieces of my notebook. Some pages were torn beyond recognition. Others bore the imprint of Ginny's heel. But it wasn't the first time my family had tried to destroy something that mattered to me. I was 7 the first time I learned that love in the Hartley household came with conditions. I'd drawn a picture of our family in Sunday school, but I'd colored outside the lines. My mother made me stand in the corner during fellowship hour, holding the drawing above my head while she explained to her friends how children need to learn excellence early. The drawing went in the trash, along with my new crayons. By 12, I'd learned the rules. Straight A's were expected, not celebrated. Emotions were weakness. Questions were rebellion. And above all, the family image at Grace Hollow Church was sacred. We were the Hartleys, my father a deacon, my mother head of the women's ministry, Aunt Ginny the tireless fundraiser who'd helped build the new fellowship hall. I'd tried to break free once before, at 19. That summer, I'd volunteered as a counselor at the church youth camp, full of idealism and faith. But something was wrong with the books. The camp fees from low-income families, kids whose parents scraped together $200 for a week of sunshine and Bible stories didn't match the deposits. Nearly $3,000 had vanished. When I brought it to Ginny, who was camp treasurer that year, she'd patted my cheek like I was still 7. Sweetie, you must have miscounted. Math was never your strong suit. But I knew what I'd seen. I took it to Reverend Collier, not the current one, but his predecessor, Reverend Matthews. Within a week, the story had transformed. Suddenly, I was the troubled teenager who'd been confused and seeking attention. Ginny suggested, with surgical precision, that perhaps the stress of college applications had overwhelmed me. My parents were mortified. The congregation whispered about poor Paul and Elaine's difficult daughter. The truth was sacrificed on the altar of reputation. I learned that in Briarfield, in Grace Hollow Church. Some sins were forgivable as long as they were hidden. But questioning the powerful, that was the only real transgression. I left for college in Philadelphia and stayed away for years. Built a career in data analytics at Clear River, where numbers didn't lie and evidence mattered. Met Derek at a conference. Thought I'd found someone different, someone honest. I was wrong about that too, but at least his deceptions gave me Maddie the only purely good thing in my complicated life. When Derek's drinking got worse and the marriage ended, I came back to Briarfield. Maybe I was naive, thinking time had changed things. My parents seemed softer, eager to know their granddaughter. The church welcomed me back with open arms and casseroles. Even Ginny seemed gracious, though her cousin Tessa never missed a chance to mention her own perfect marriage and 2 honor roll sons. But underneath the surface kindness, nothing had changed. Every Sunday dinner at my parents' house came with subtle digs about single motherhood. Every interaction with Ginny carried the subtext of my old confusion about the camp funds. They tolerated my presence as long as I played my role, the prodigal daughter, grateful to be accepted back, silent about the past. The worst part was watching them with Maddie. They loved her, in their way, but it was the same conditional love that had suffocated me. When she cried, they called her dramatic. When she expressed fear about her father's erratic behavior, they quoted scripture about honoring thy father. When she drew abstract art instead of realistic pictures, my mother would purse her lips and suggest proper art lessons. I'd started keeping the notebook 3 months ago, after Derek's first violation of the custody agreement. My lawyer said documentation was everything, but it became more than evidence. It was proof that I wasn't crazy, that these things were really happening, that my daughter's anxiety was real and valid. Now, staring at the torn pages, I thought about Jenny's sneer in the church hallway. Prayers can't save you. She was right, but not in the way she meant. Prayers wouldn't save me because I'd been praying to the wrong authority. I'd been seeking validation from people who weaponized faith, who used God's name to justify their cruelty. The memory of that missing camp money surfaced again, sharper now with my professional expertise. $3,000 in 2011. If that was a pattern, not an isolated incident, how much had disappeared over the years? How many youth programs underfunded? How many scholarship kids turned away while Jenny drove her new Lexus and took her mysterious planning retreats to Hilton Head? I pulled out my laptop and opened a new spreadsheet. If there was one thing my family never understood about me, it was this: I might have been emotional as a child, might have cried when they hurt me, but I'd grown into someone who understood the power of data. Numbers didn't lie. Patterns revealed truth. Tomorrow, I'd start gathering evidence, not just about the notebook, not just about their treatment of Maddie, but about everything. The church's financial records were public. All 501c3 organizations had to file Form 990s. Jenny might control the narrative from the pulpit, but she couldn't control the numbers. They thought tearing my notebook was the end. They didn't realize it was the beginning. Monday morning at 7:45, I dropped Maddie at school and drove straight to Clear River Analytics. My hands were steady as I badged in, but my mind was racing. I had 30 minutes before the morning stand-up meeting, 30 minutes to begin documenting what they'd tried to destroy. "You look like you're planning a hostile takeover," Noah Alvarez said from the next cubicle, peering over his monitors. As a security engineer at Bayline Systems, he worked remotely most days but kept a desk at our shared workspace for the collaboration potential and, I suspected, for the decent coffee. "Just some personal research," I said, then paused. Noah had helped me set up cloud backups after Derek had accidentally destroyed my first laptop during the divorce. "Actually, can I ask you something? Hypothetically?" "Hypothetically is my favorite word." He rolled his chair over, bringing the scent of his signature black coffee with 3 sugars. "Shoot. If someone wanted to research a nonprofit's financial records, public records, what would be the most thorough approach?" His eyebrows rose. "This about your church. I saw your mom's Facebook post yesterday. Something about prayers for family unity. Of course, she'd already started her campaign." "Something like that?" "Well, hypothetically," Noah said, his fingers already flying across his keyboard, "you'd start with GuideStar for the 990 forms, then ProPublica's Nonprofit Explorer for comparison. State charity registration would be next. Pennsylvania has decent transparency laws. Banking would be trickier, but if there's a pattern of suspicious activity—" "There is. Or was. Maybe still is." He turned his screen toward me. "Grace Hollow Foundation. Right, your Aunt Virginia Crow is listed as treasurer." He clicked through several pages. "Interesting. Their reported program expenses versus administrative costs, that ratio's off." "Way off." I leaned closer. The numbers on the screen seemed to pulse with possibility. "How off?" "They're reporting 70% program expenses. But look." He pulled up another window. "Their actual program descriptions are vague. Community outreach, youth development, spiritual enrichment, no specific allocations, and these administrative expenses, He whistled low. Someone's categorizing a lot of overhead as program costs. Is that illegal? Not necessarily illegal, but it's definitely worth investigating. The IRS takes false reporting seriously, and if donations were diverted, he gave me a meaningful look. That's fraud. Wire fraud if any electronic transfers were involved. Each transaction could be a separate federal offense. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. We need to discuss yesterday. Family dinner, 6 p.m. Don't disappoint us again. I need everything, I said to Noah. Every public record, every filing, everything you can legally access. I can do better than that. My roommate from MIT works for the Pennsylvania Attorney General's Office, Charity Oversight Division. If you find something concrete, she'd be very interested. By lunch, I had 5 years of Grace Hollow Foundation's financial records spread across my dual monitors. The patterns Noah had spotted were just at the beginning, event expenses that aligned with Ginny's vacation schedule, vendor payments to companies that didn't appear to exist, a youth scholarship fund that had distributed exactly 3 scholarships in 5 years, despite raising over $40,000 annually. But I needed more than suspicious patterns. I needed proof. That's when I remembered Mrs. Carver. The church's volunteer bookkeeper was 73, meticulous, and had always been kind to me, even after the camp fund incident. She lived for her grandchildren and her garden, and she'd mentioned once, quietly, that she just followed directions when it came to the church's books. I pulled up my personal email and crafted a message carefully. Mrs. Carver, I'm working on a data analytics project about nonprofit best practices. Since you have so much experience with church bookkeeping, I'd love to get your input on proper documentation standards. Coffee this week, Eva. Her response came within an hour. Dear Ava, how lovely to hear from you. I'm free Wednesday at 2 p.m. The Bluebird Cafe. I have some concerns I've been praying about. Perhaps God sent you to help. Martha Carver. My phone rang the school nurse. Maddie was having another anxiety attack. As I grabbed my keys, I thought about my mother's dinner summons. They wanted to force me back in line, to make me small and compliant again. But they'd made a crucial error in destroying my notebook so publicly. They'd shown Maddie who they really were, and they'd given me nothing left to lose. That afternoon, while Maddie rested on the couch with her art supplies, I opened my laptop again. This time, I wasn't looking at numbers. I was documenting everything: the torn notebook incident, Ginny's threat, my parents' history of control. I uploaded photos I'd taken of the scattered pages on the church floor, screenshots of my mother's Facebook posts painting me as troubled, the threatening text about dinner. Mom, Maddie's voice was small. Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us? I pulled her close. They're mad at me, sweetheart, not you. But Aunt Ginny stepped on my therapy notes. On purpose. I know, baby. That wasn't okay. Is that why we have to go to court about Dad? I kissed the top of her head, breathing in her strawberry shampoo. We go to court to keep you safe. And now I need to make sure we're safe from other kinds of harm, too. That evening, I sent a reply to my mother. Can't make dinner. Previous commitment. Her response was immediate. This is not a request. I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded Noah the initial findings and asked him to create a secure backup of everything. Then I called my lawyer, Marla Duval, and left a detailed voicemail about Sunday's incident and my concerns about potential witness intimidation. By 10 p.m., I'd created a comprehensive timeline going back to the Camp Fund incident, cross-referenced with the Foundation's financial irregularities. The picture emerging was damning, but I needed someone on the inside to confirm my suspicions. Wednesday couldn't come soon enough. Wednesday arrived with spring rain that turned Briarfield's streets into rivers of doubt. The Bluebird Cafe sat on Main Street, far enough from Grace Hollow Church that we wouldn't run into the usual congregation crowd. Mrs. Carver was already there when I arrived at 2 p.m., her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug, her usually cheerful face drawn with worry. Eva, dear, she said as I sat down, I've been praying about this conversation since Sunday. What they did to you and little Maddie. She shook her head. It wasn't Christian. Mrs. Carver, I need to ask you some difficult questions. She nodded, pulling a worn envelope from her purse. I thought you might. I've been keeping copies. You see, just in case God ever sent someone brave enough to ask. My heart rate spiked. Copies of what? The real receipts. The ones Ginny tells me to lose after I've entered the official versions. She slid the envelope across the table. 5 years' worth. I know I should have spoken up sooner. But my grandson, Jeremy, he got that scholarship to Briarfield Christian Academy. Ginny made it clear that scholarship could disappear if I became confused about the books. Inside the envelope were photocopies of receipts, credit card statements, and handwritten notes. A receipt from Bergdorf's for $3,000, allocated in the official books as youth retreat supplies. A spa weekend at the Greenbrier Resort, filed as Women's Ministry Conference. Jewelry purchases categorized as appreciation gifts for volunteers, though no volunteers ever received them. There's more, Mrs. Carver whispered. The Chromebook fundraiser last year. We raised $18,000 for 30 computers, but we only bought 15. The rest of the money went to what Ginny called administrative overhead. Did you keep records of the actual purchases? She nodded, pulling out her phone. I photograph everything now. Been doing it since that poor Martinez family was told there wasn't enough in the emergency fund to help with their fire damage, even though we'd just had a $20,000 fundraiser for exactly that purpose. I thought of the Martinez family. They'd lost everything in an electrical fire last winter. The church had given them $500 and a prayer shawl. They'd moved in with relatives in Ohio. Mrs. Carver, would you be willing to share these with an attorney? I've been waiting years for someone to ask. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Your aunt's been stealing from God and calling it ministry. Your parents enable her because she keeps them in their positions of power. But those children who didn't get computers, those families who didn't get help, they matter more than Ginny's jewelry collection. That evening, Noah and I set up a secure digital archive of everything. He'd created an anonymous submission portal for other church members to share their experiences. Within hours, we had 17 responses. Promised my son diabetes camp funding, received nothing. One read, Ginny said the funds were redirected to more urgent needs. Donated my late mother's jewelry for the auction. Another shared, saw Ginny wearing her emerald brooch at Easter service. Marla Duval reviewed everything Thursday morning. This is sufficient for multiple charges, she said over video call. But we need to be strategic. Ginny will claim pastoral discretion, that she was authorized to use funds as she saw fit for the church's benefit. What if we could prove a pattern of deception show that she deliberately misled donors? That would be fraud, clear federal wire fraud if any online donations were involved. Marla leaned forward. But Eva, once we file formal complaints with the AG and the IRS, there's no going back. Your family will go nuclear. They already have. They threatened to question my fitness as a mother. Then we need to control the narrative. I suggest we prepare a comprehensive package evidence, testimonies, everything, and release it strategically. Do you know any journalists? Noah did. His college roommate's sister, Kayla Boone, worked for Briarfield Public News. She'd been investigating nonprofit mismanagement across the state and would be very interested in a story about a prominent church foundation. Friday afternoon, my father appeared at my office. Security called to say I had a visitor who claimed to be family. He stood in the lobby like judgment incarnate, his deacon's suit impeccable despite the rain. Eva, this stops now. What stops? Dad. Whatever vindictive scheme you're orchestrating. Ginny told us about Mrs. Carver's confusion, about the questions you've been asking. His voice carried that particular tone of religious authority that used to make me shrink. You're hurting the church. You're hurting God's work. I'm exposing theft. You're seeking revenge because we held you accountable for your failures as a mother. I thought of Maddie's tear-stained face, of the torn notebook, of years of twisted love. No, Dad, I'm seeking justice. There's a difference. If you pursue this, you'll no longer be welcome at Grace Hollow. Neither will Maddie. The threat hung between us like a sword. But I'd learned something in the days since Sunday their weapons only worked if I valued what they could take away. "Then I guess we'll find a church that doesn't steal from children," I said. His face went red, then white. "The anniversary celebration is in 9 days. If you do anything to embarrass this family, to hurt your mother—" Like she hurt Maddie, like Ginny hurt all those families who trusted her with their donations. He turned without another word and left. But I knew this was just the beginning. That night, I created a presentation clean, professional, devastating. Every receipt, every testimony, every piece of evidence organized and cited. Noah set up the QR codes that would link to the full documentation. Kayla prepared her story, waiting for the signal to publish. The 75th anniversary of Grace Hollow Church was in 9 days. They thought it would be their celebration. It would be their reckoning. The counterattack began Monday morning at 6:30 a.m. with a text in the Grace Hollow Women's Ministry group chat, a screenshot helpfully forwarded to me by Mrs. Carver. "Dear Sisters in Christ," my mother had written, "please pray for our family. Eva is experiencing some mental health challenges that are affecting her judgment. We're concerned about her stability and its impact on dear Maddie. If she reaches out to you with wild accusations, please redirect her to pastoral counseling. In his love, Elaine." By 7 a.m., my phone was buzzing with messages. Some offering prayers, others fishing for gossip. Tessa, Ginny's daughter, had posted on Facebook, "So heartbreaking when family members struggle with paranoia and persecution complexes. Praying for healing and restoration. Mental health, awareness. Family first." The gaslighting was surgical in its precision. At Maddie's school drop-off, I noticed the looks. The principal, Mrs. Henderson, made a point of asking if everything was all right at home. 2 mothers from Maddie's class suddenly remembered urgent appointments when I approached. "They're isolating you," Noah observed when I called him from the parking lot. "Classic manipulation tactic. Make you seem unstable, then no one believes your evidence." But Ginny wasn't done. Tuesday brought an email from the Grace Hollow Youth Choir director, copied to what seemed like half the congregation. "Dear Eva, after prayerful consideration and discussions with church leadership, we feel it might be best for Maddie to take a brief hiatus from choir while your family works through its current challenges. We want to ensure a stable environment for all our young singers. Blessings, Janet." Maddie cried for an hour when I had to tell her. "But we've been practicing for the anniversary concert for 3 months. I have a solo." "I know, sweetheart. This isn't fair." "Is it because of what I said about Dad? Did I do something wrong?" "No, baby. Never. This is about grown-ups behaving badly." Wednesday evening, my parents escalated. The doorbell rang at 8:45 p.m. late enough to be inappropriate, early enough to claim reasonableness. My father stood on my doorstep with Reverend Collier. "Eva," the Reverend said with practiced concern, "your parents are worried. They've asked me to mediate a family reconciliation." "There's nothing to reconcile. They destroyed my property and traumatized my daughter." "Surely that's an exaggeration. Your mother says it was a misunderstanding about some personal notes. It was documented evidence for a custody hearing." My father interrupted. "Eva, if you don't participate in family counseling and stop this vendetta against Ginny, we'll have no choice but to petition for emergency custody of Maddie. Your mental state. Get off my property." My voice was steel. "Now!" Reverend Collier raised his hands. "Let's all calm down. Ava, the church's anniversary is this Sunday. Surely we can table these discussions until after the anniversary where Ginny will be celebrated for her fundraising, where she'll steal more money while you look the other way. That's a serious accusation." "It's a documented fact." "Would you like to see the receipts?" "The ones showing she spent donation money on jewelry while telling the Martinez family there wasn't enough to help them." His face went pale. My father grabbed his arm. "She's delusional, Reverend. You can see it." But Collier was studying me differently now. "What receipts?" "The ones I'll be sharing with the Attorney General's office, and the IRS, and anyone else who'll listen." Thursday morning, Ginny played her trump card. An email arrived from Paul. Subject line, final warning. Eva, your destructive behavior leaves us no choice. If you don't publicly apologize at Sunday's service for your false accusations and mental instability, Maddie will be permanently removed from all church activities. Additionally, we'll file a formal complaint with Child Protective Services regarding your paranoid delusions and their impact on Maddie's well-being. We have 17 congregation members willing to testify about your erratic behavior. You have until Saturday at noon to confirm your public apology. Dad. I read it 3 times. Each word a calculated wound. Then I forwarded it to Marla. This is witness intimidation, she said immediately, and arguably extortion. Save everything. They're going to call CPS on me. They're threatening to. It's a scare tactic. But Eva, this email is a gift. They've put their threats in writing. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Eva, this is Janet Morrison from choir. I need to speak with you privately. We met at a Starbucks 2 towns over. Janet looked exhausted, older than her 50 years. I didn't want to remove Maddie, she said without preamble. Ginny made me. She said if I didn't, she'd cut the youth music program's funding entirely. We'd lose instruments, sheet music, everything. She pulled out her phone. But I recorded the conversation. I've been recording a lot lately. She played the audio. Ginny's voice, crystal clear. That little brat doesn't sing another note in this church until her mother learns her place. And if you have a problem with that, Janet, remember who signs your stipend checks. Why are you sharing this with me? Janet's eyes filled with tears. Because my nephew was one of the kids who didn't get a Chromebook. His family donated $200 to that fundraiser money they couldn't afford. He's using a 10-year-old laptop that crashes every time he tries to do homework. Meanwhile, Ginny drives a new Lexus. Friday night, Noah called with news. The portal's blown up. 43 submissions now. Eva, there's a pattern going back 12 years. Ever since Ginny took over the foundation. 12 years. At minimum, possibly more. Conservative estimate she's diverted over $300,000. $300,000. Stolen from families who trusted their church, from kids who needed computers, from people in crisis who were told there wasn't enough to help. Saturday morning at 11:55 a.m., 5 minutes before my father's deadline. I sent my response. I'll be at Sunday's service. I have something to say. His reply was immediate. Good. Your mother will write your statement. Memorize it. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the presentation Noah and I had prepared, now updated with Janet's recording and the new testimonies. The QR codes were embedded in a legitimate-looking anniversary program I'd designed, celebrating 75 years of faith and service. Sunday would indeed be memorable, just not the way they planned. Saturday night. I couldn't sleep. Every detail had to be perfect, one miscalculation, and they'd spin this as the ravings of a disturbed woman. Noah had worked until 2 a.m. finalizing the presentation, making it bulletproof. The QR codes were embedded in 500 anniversary programs I'd had printed at a shop 3 towns over. Programs that looked exactly like the official ones except for one crucial addition. Are you sure about this? Marla had asked during our final call. Once you do this, there's no undoing it. They threatened my child. They've stolen from hundreds of families. Someone has to stop them. Then we go all in. I'll be there, sitting in the back. The moment you give the signal. I file the emergency injunction to freeze the foundation's assets. The AG's office will be watching the live stream. Yes, I made sure there would be one. Kayla from the news will be in the parking lot with her cameraman. Sunday morning arrived gray and heavy with coming rain. I dressed Maddie in her favorite blue dress, the one she was supposed to wear for her choir solo. Why do I have to look nice if I can't sing? She asked. Because today, sweetheart, we're going to stand up straight and tell the truth, and truth deserves our best dress. We arrived at 9:45 a.m. The parking lot was already full, members streaming in for the special anniversary service. I saw the official programs stacked by the door and quietly added my stack beside them. They disappeared into hands quickly. No one noticed they were different. My parents stood at the entrance like sentries. My mother's smile was arctic. "Eva, so glad you came to your senses. Here's your statement." She pressed a folded paper into my hand. "You'll speak right after Ginny's presentation about the Foundation's accomplishments." I glanced at it. A masterpiece of self-abasement. "I apologize for my recent confusion and false accusations. I'm seeking help for my mental health struggles and ask for your prayers and forgiveness." "Perfect," I said, tucking it into my pocket. The sanctuary filled quickly. 200 became 300, then 400. Extra chairs were brought in. The anniversary had drawn alumni from across the state. Behind the pulpit, a screen displayed rotating photos of the church's history. Ginny sat in the front row, resplendent in a cream suit that probably cost more than most families' monthly mortgage. A diamond brooch, Mrs. Martinez's mother's brooch, if I wasn't mistaken, glinted at her throat. The service began with hymns, prayers, testimonials about the church's legacy. Then Reverend Collier announced, "Now, let's celebrate our remarkable foundation with a presentation from our devoted treasurer, Virginia Crowe." Ginny took the microphone with practiced grace. Her slideshow began photos of smiling children, mission trips, community dinners. 75 years of service," she said, her voice honey smooth. "And in just my 12 years as treasurer, we've raised over $800,000 for God's work." I noticed people throughout the congregation glancing at their phones. The QR code on their programs was labeled innocuously, "Anniversary Memory Share, upload your Grace Hollow stories." But scanning it opened something very different. "This year alone," Ginny continued, "we provided 30 Chromebooks to underprivileged students." A murmur rippled through the crowd. On their phones, they were seeing the real receipts: 15 Chromebooks purchased, 15 delivered, funded diabetes camp for 7 children. More murmurs. The documentation showed 3 children funded, 4 turned away despite available funds, and supported numerous families in crisis. Someone in the middle section gasped audibly. They were looking at the Martinez family's rejection letter, dated the same day Ginny had purchased a $3,000 spa package with foundation funds. Ginny faltered, noticing the disturbance. Is something wrong?" Reverend Collier stepped forward. "Perhaps we should move on to, actually," I said, standing. "I believe I'm scheduled to speak now." My mother's face went white. My father started to rise, but I was already walking to the front, Maddie's hand in mine. "Good morning," I said into the microphone. "I'm Eva Hartley, and I was asked to make a statement about last Sunday, when my notebook was destroyed in this sanctuary." Ginny moved toward me, but Marla stood up in the back, her presence a clear warning. "Last Sunday," I continued, "my mother tore apart my daughter's therapy notes and custody documentation. My aunt ground them under her heel and told me, 'Prayers can't save you.' She was right. Prayers can't save us from those who steal in God's name." The congregation was fully engaged with their phones now, scrolling through evidence, gasps and whispers building like a wave. But truth can save us, documentation can save us, and courage can save us. I clicked the remote Noah had given me. The anniversary slideshow disappeared, replaced by my presentation. $300,000, I said, as the first slide appeared a comprehensive breakdown of diverted funds. "That's the conservative estimate of what's been stolen from this congregation over 12 years. Not spent unwisely, not mismanaged, stolen." "This is outrageous!" Ginny shrieked, lunging for the microphone. But her movement was arrested by what appeared on the screen next a photo of her wearing Mrs. Martinez's emerald brooch, side by side with the donation receipt. "Every document you're seeing has been verified," I continued. "Every receipt authenticated. 43 members of this congregation have come forward with their own stories of promised funds that never materialized, while luxury purchases were made with foundation credit cards." My father was on his feet. "This is slander. She's mentally ill." I clicked to the next slide, his email threatening CPS, threatening Maddie's place in choir, demanding my public humiliation. This is what happens when you question power in this place. They don't defend themselves with truth. They attack with intimidation. The sanctuary erupted. People were standing, shouting questions, demanding answers. Mrs. Martinez was crying. Parents who'd been told there wasn't money for youth programs were staring at receipts for Ginny's jewelry. Through the chaos, one voice rang clear. It was old Mr. Harrison from the Board of Elders, a man who'd said maybe 10 words in my entire life. I motioned for an immediate vote of no confidence in the Foundation Board and a forensic audit of all accounts. Seconded, called 3 voices simultaneously. Ginny grabbed the microphone from my hand. This is lies fabrication. You can't believe. But I had one more card to play. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the sound system Noah had shown me how. Janet's recording filled the sanctuary. Ginny's voice crystal clear. That little brat doesn't sing another note in this church until her mother learns her place. The congregation went silent, then exploded again. How dare you threaten a child? Someone shouted. My son didn't get his insulin because you said there weren't funds. You told me the scholarship program was full. Reverend Collier tried to restore order, but his voice was drowned out. That's when Marla stood and walked forward, her presence commanding attention. She wasn't alone. Beside her stood a woman in a dark suit. My name is Marla Duval, she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. I'm an attorney representing Ms. Hartley and several members of this congregation. This is Agent Patricia Wells from the Attorney General's office. The silence was instant and complete. Agent Wells took the microphone. Superb, based on evidence provided in our preliminary investigation, we're issuing an immediate asset freeze on all Grace Hollow Foundation accounts pending a full forensic audit. Any attempt to move, hide, or destroy financial records from this point forward will be considered obstruction of justice. Ginny's face went from red to white. You can't, this is a house of God. And that, Agent Wells replied coolly, makes the theft of charitable funds a federal offense. My mother stood then, her composed mask finally cracking. Eva, how could you? This is our church, our family. This was never about family. Mom, this was about control. I turned to address the congregation, Maddie still holding my hand. They threatened to call CPS on me. They tried to destroy evidence of my ex-husband's abuse. They punished a 9-year-old girl for her mother's refusal to stay silent. I clicked to the final slide, the email from my father, blown up for everyone to read. His threat to weaponize Child Protective Services, to exile Maddie from her church community, all because I dared to document the truth. This is what they do, I said. They wrap abuse in scripture, call control love, and demand silence in the name of family unity. But secrets in darkness have no power when brought to light. The youth choir director, Janet, stood up. I have more recordings, 3 years' worth. Every time Ginny threatened to cut programs if we didn't comply with her demands. Mrs. Carver stood next. I have copies of every manipulated receipt, every donation diverted, 5 years of evidence. One by one, people stood, each with a story, each with proof. Ginny tried to leave, but found the exit blocked by 2 state police officers who had arrived with Agent Wells. Ma'am, we need you to remain here while we secure the Foundation offices. This is persecution, she screamed. Paul, Elaine, tell them. But my parents were frozen, watching their carefully constructed world crumble. The congregation they'd controlled through shame and status was rising against them. Reverend Collier finally found his voice. The Board of Elders will convene an emergency session immediately. Services are suspended. But people weren't leaving. They were gathering in clusters, comparing stories, sharing evidence. The Martinez family was surrounded by others who'd been denied help. Parents were discovering their fundraising efforts had been systematically plundered. Through it all, the cameras rolled. Kayla and her crew had somehow made it inside, documenting everything. By tomorrow, this would be statewide news. Eva, My father approached, his voice broken. You've destroyed everything. 75 years of ministry. No, Dad, you destroyed it. Every time you chose reputation over righteousness. Every time you enabled Jenny's theft. Every time you prioritized the family image over actual families in need. We did what we thought was best. You did what was easy, what kept you in power. I pulled Maddie closer, but I did what was right, for her, for every child who didn't get what they were promised, for every family told to pray harder while Jenny spent their donations at Nordstrom. The sound of sirens grew closer, more police arriving to secure evidence. Through the windows, I could see news vans pulling up. Jenny was escorted out in handcuffs, still shrieking about persecution and ingratitude. The image would make front pages across Pennsylvania, the pious treasurer in her cream suit and stolen jewelry, led away from the church she'd plundered. My mother approached me one last time, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. I'll never forgive you for this. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. Mom, I'm done asking for anything from you. She turned to Maddie. Sweetheart, don't you want to come with Grandma? We can know, Maddie said, her young voice strong. You hurt my mom. You hurt me. You're not safe. The truth from a 9-year-old's lips, simple, devastating, final. As we walked out of Grace Hollow Church, possibly for the last time, Maddie tugged my hand. Mom, was that the right thing to do? I knelt beside her, there in the parking lot filling with police cars and news vans. What do you think? She considered carefully. They stole money from kids. They lied. They were mean to us, and we told the truth about it. That's exactly right. Then yes, she said with the certainty only children can muster. It was the right thing. Behind us, the church bells began to ring, not called by any human hand, but triggered by the emergency systems as police secured the building. They rang and rang, a funeral toll for 75 years of complicity, a birth announcement for whatever would come next. The rain that had threatened all morning finally began to fall, washing the dust from the church steps, from the cars, from our faces as we stood there, free. The church bells were still ringing as Agent Wells approached me in the parking lot, rain beating on her dark jacket. Ms. Hartley, we'll need you to provide a formal statement, but that can wait until tomorrow. What you did today. She paused, professional mask slipping slightly. That took courage. Behind her, Jenny was being placed in the back of a state police cruiser, her cream suit now rain-soaked and clinging. She caught my eye through the window, and for a moment, I saw not the imperious treasurer, but a frightened woman watching her carefully constructed life collapse. Then her face hardened, and she mouthed something that might have been a curse or a prayer. Eva. Noah jogged over, tablet in hand, rain dripping from his hair. The live stream has 40,000 views and climbing. The QR code's been scanned over 3,000 times. This is going national. National. The word should have frightened me, but all I felt was empty relief, the kind that comes after you've held your breath too long and finally exhale. Ms. Hartley. Kayla Boone appeared with her cameraman. Can we get a statement? I looked down at Maddie, who nodded. Go ahead, Mom, tell them the truth. So I did. Standing there in the rain, my daughter's hand in mine, I spoke to the camera about faith weaponized, about families who trusted and were betrayed, about the courage of ordinary people like Mrs. Carver and Janet who kept records and waited for justice. This isn't about destroying faith, I said. It's about demanding that those who claim to speak for God actually serve Him and serve the people who sacrifice to support His work. The emergency board meeting lasted 3 hours. Through the church windows, we could see animated discussions, raised hands, votes being counted. When they finally emerged, Mr. Harrison looked aged but determined. The foundation board has been dissolved, he announced to those still gathered. A forensic audit will begin immediately. Virginia Crow and any complicit parties will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. All frozen funds will be returned to their intended purposes once verified. My parents emerged last, looking smaller somehow. My father's deacon's authority had evaporated. My mother's perfect composure was shattered. They walked to their car without looking at anyone, certainly not at me. I knew this was goodbye, not the dramatic kind with shouted words and slammed doors, but the quiet kind where people simply cease to exist for each other. "You okay?" Noah asked. "I will be." The next morning, Ginny was formally charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. The investigation revealed she'd diverted over $400,000 over 13 years. The Chromebooks that were never purchased, the camp scholarships never awarded, the emergency funds never distributed, it all added up to a staggering betrayal. But there was restoration too. Anonymous donors, moved by the story, contributed enough to fulfill every broken promise. All 30 Chromebooks were purchased and distributed. The Martinez family received a check that helped them restart. 7 kids got their diabetes camp fully funded. The church itself split. Some members, unable to reconcile the revelation with their faith in the institution, left for other congregations. Others stayed, determined to rebuild on a foundation of transparency. Reverend Collier resigned, acknowledging his failure to provide oversight. A younger pastor was called a woman who'd built her ministry on accountability and service. My parents moved to Florida, to a retirement community where no one knew their story. They sent one letter, not to me, but to Maddie, filled with Bible verses about forgiveness. Maddie read it once and asked me to help her write back. Her response was brief. Forgiveness comes after repentance. I learned that in my new Sunday school. Because yes, we found a new church, a smaller one, across town, where the books were open to anyone who asked and the pastor's kids wore hand-me-downs, where Maddie sang in the choir without fear of retribution, where her art was celebrated, where questions were welcomed rather than silenced. The legal proceedings took 18 months. Ginny was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution. The day of her sentencing, she stood in court in a plain gray suit, no jewelry, no designer anything, and finally spoke the truth. I lost my way. I told myself I deserved compensation for all my volunteer hours. Then I told myself I was borrowing it, that I'd pay it back. Eventually, I stopped telling myself anything and just took what I wanted. It was the closest thing to an apology we'd ever get. Maddie and I were in the courtroom that day. As they led Ginny away, she looked at us. I expected hatred, but saw only exhaustion. The performance was over. The mask had finally fallen. Outside the courthouse, the Martinez family waited. Mrs. Martinez hugged me tight, whispering, "Thank you for being brave when we couldn't be." "We were all brave," I told her, "just at different times." 3 years have passed now. Maddie is 12, confident and artistic, unafraid to speak her truth. She painted a picture last month at church with its doors thrown open, light streaming out, people streaming in. But if you look closely, you can see shadows in the corners being swept away, and at the center, a young girl holding a candle that illuminates everything. "It's about that Sunday," she told me, "when we turned the lights on." The Grace Hollow Church still stands, renewed and humbled. They installed a plaque by the entrance, "Truth and Transparency, the Foundation of Faith." Every financial record is posted online. Every board meeting is open to members. Trust, once shattered, is slowly being rebuilt with painstaking care. I still work at Clear River Analytics, but now I also consult for nonprofits, helping them establish transparent financial systems. Noah and I developed an app that allows donors to track their contributions in real time. We've implemented it in 16 churches so far. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that Sunday morning when my mother tore my notebook apart. It felt like the end of everything, but destruction, I've learned, can be a beginning. Sometimes things need to be torn down to the foundation before they can be rebuilt properly. Last week, I received an unexpected call. It was Tessa, Ginny's daughter, my cousin who'd posted those cruel social media messages. "I wanted to apologize," she said, "and to thank you. My mom. I knew something was wrong, but I was too afraid to look. You did what I should have done." "We all do what we can when we can," I told her. "Could we maybe get coffee sometime? I'd like Maddie to know her cousin." I thought about cycles of abuse, of silence, of complicity, and I thought about breaking them. "Yes," I said, "let's do that." Because that's what revenge looks like when it's complete, not just tearing down what was wrong, but building something better in its place, not just exposing the darkness, but becoming the light. The bells of Grace Hollow Church still ring every Sunday, but now they sound different to me, not a call to blind obedience, but a reminder that truth, like those bells, resonates beyond any attempt to silence it. Thank you for listening to this story of truth triumphing over corruption, of a mother's courage in the face of family betrayal. I'm curious, where are you listening to this story from? Please comment below and let me know what country or state you're in. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice and redemption, and share your thoughts about Eva's journey. What would you have done in her place? Your comments create our community, and I read every single one.